Welcome back, everybody. Going to talk about something today that we never really dug into this. We love our pets. Specifically, you got a dog. It's like a member of your family, and she's somebody who has been instrumental, pioneer in New Mexico, setting up a canine physical rehab center. She's kind of the go-to for canine rehab, animals in general. Today, we're going to look at the growth of a puppy. What happens in the stages all along the way? And yeah, it's always been a phrase with our children. Oh, they grow up so fast. They grow up so fast. Puppies really do grow up fast. It's amazing. A year later, we're almost out of the puppy stage. We're going to look at that today with Dr. Laura Hady, who joins us on the program. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Steve. I get to talk about one of my favorite topics. I've got three 7-month-old puppies in my household. Two are Chihuahua crosses, and one is a healer cross. And it's a very exciting time. It's like getting that new baby, being that expectant mom or dad. And whether you get them from a breeder or whether you get them from a rescue group, you want to know some basic facts of what's going on between birth and the time you pick them up, maybe say about 8 weeks of age. Or what type of nutrition did they get? Were they bottle fed versus were they nursed by a mom at the breeder's house? Were they put on different types of surfaces or were they kept in a cage? Because that can affect their ability to stand and move correctly. You don't use it, you lose it, and they've got to
Uh,
be able to stand up or they become swimmer puppies. And the other thing is what type of play did they get? Some breeders will buy those large kiddie pools and they have puppy pads in there and the dogs get a walk on different surfaces. So those are that first set of 8 weeks, those are highly developmental times for the puppy.
mm. But you said you have three puppies in your home. Are you fostering, or these are all yours?
These are all mine. I tend to rescue dogs. I have a whole network of people out there, whether it be my clients throughout the years or whether it be other veterinarians. And I have local taps with the rescue groups as well as animal welfare and animal control. So I've adopted from all stages in life, and it's very interesting to me how sometimes you get caught in the problem with a growth deformity and what we can do along the lines to make those people on the front lines of rescue and those breeders how we can catch these things early and help solve the problems.
So take us through the stages of a growing puppy. So we have the beginning. I don't know if it's 8 weeks or a little bit more where they're usually with their mom. And
Yeah.
then what happens past that?
Typically, most breeders will adopt them out after the 8 week stage. And we have to remember too that the 8 week to 12 week stage in a puppy is the socialization period. So they need to be socialized at this time with different types of people and different types of animals because behavior will also help dictate their growth as well. This may be the time where they go to that first veterinary visit. And so it's a very exciting time for me because I get to not only check out their eyes, their teeth, their ears, their heart, but I also get to feel the joints for the first time. And
Hmm.
there's some joints that are supposed to feel loosey goosey at 8 weeks, and there's some joints that you shouldn't hear any popping or feel anything changes. For example, when you go to rotate the hip, that's one of the first things that we check in these puppies. Um, they may have already had a vaccine prior to coming for the exam. How are we going to get them set up on that every 3 to 4 week schedule as they grow so that we can check them out? And then were they given any parasite medication? Has someone looked at a fecal sample because parasites can suck nutrients out and they may have gotten parasites from their mom, particularly in a rescue situation, and
Sure.
you don't know that. So we want to check those things out, and that's what we discuss at that first visit.
Yeah, you just brought back a memory of 2 years ago. I already had a kitten, and
Hmm.
then I adopted another one right after that, a couple of months after. And the
Right.
second kitten had parasites.
Mhm.
and they weren't able to get rid of them right away. So it was
Right.
kind of an extended period of time. So
Mhm.
I had to keep the two kittens segregated.
Right.
Um, but yeah, parasites can be a bit challenging, like you say, depending where they're coming from. Mine was a foster, both of them were. But you could have the cleanest household ever and get parasites in your pet. Right?
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. And we like to talk about at this stage, most of these little guys should be being fed, particularly in that 8 to 16 week period, 3 times a day. And we discuss what brand of food that they're feeding. Definitely some people are very excited about feeding raw diets, and these guys are really, really young, so their susceptibility to get parasites like salmonella or other things is higher. Also, when we look at these diets, we want to look at, has that diet been tested for the proper calcium to phosphorus ratio? And it seems, wow, you feed them bones or you feed them organs or whatnot, but there's a very precise 1.6 to 1 ratio, and that changes. That goes a little bit higher when they're puppies, and we have to make sure things like vitamin D are also within check for these guys.
Socialization, obviously key. What should you be doing in those early stages? Because I feel that you are you're molding your puppy or your pet, for you and your family and your lifestyle. It's I know in my dog, he has a rhythm. And it's part of, my world. And it's kind of remarkable when you see how they adapt to different situations. But what should we be doing during the socialization stage?
So typically, a lot of people ask about walking them on public walk lanes or going to dog parks and whatnot. And I really caution until they've had that second or third vaccine to keep them away from those areas. That being said, that doesn't mean you can't put your pup in the stroller and take them out for a walk. And when you're in an area where it's safe to let them get out on a little leash and a harness and do a little bit of walking. But as you get into those higher air traffic areas, not everyone in New Mexico cleans up the stool or whatnot after their pets on a walk. So I always like to have that stroller option to get them back in there. If I go into business, lots of businesses are pet friendly now. I'd still have a little carrier for them, so that they're not picking up something within the store, but they're still getting to meet people and see new circumstances and ride in the car.
So initially, I said they grow up fast.
Mhm,
Puppies really do. What happens when we get to like let's call it the 6 month stage? And
mhm.
when does a puppy just become what we would consider an adult?
Typically, they become an adult depending on the size of the dog, usually about a year of age. So when they're going through that age, where we give maybe that last set of vaccines around 16 weeks, say they get their rabies tag, and I always call it their temporary driver's license here in New Mexico, and we may not see them back for their spay or neuter. That's a key growth area. So what happens is at the end of the long bones, there's softer cartilage so that it can expand and grow. And what can happen in these guys, particularly, I'll give two examples. One in larger breed dogs like the Labrador Retrievers or the Rottweilers, German Shepherds, Great Danes, is that if these bones are growing way too fast and that cartilage at the end of those bones outgrows that blood supply, it can basically, that little flap of cartilage can now rub and it can become a flap, and that flap can become dry, hence the name osteochondrosis dissecans, dry dissecans. And that little fluid, joint fluid, can sneak in underneath, and then you start to get inflammation. With inflammation, that flap may break off. And so then it's like having that piece of gravel in your shoe, and dogs are weight bearing on their front
Ooh.
legs, and you can start to have problems. Or say that you have on your arm, you have the radius kind of in the front and the ulna that goes back, it's a little bit longer, but if that ulna is growing way too fast, you can have a little piece that ulna can break off when it has uneven ride against where as the humerus and the radius come together all together within that joint. And so it again, you can have another little joint mouse and that can make it difficult. What we worry about in the little guys, so having chihuahuas, so short, crooked legs, also think about basset hounds and corgis and little shih tzus and yorkies. What can happen with those guys if their bones are growing out of proportion is they can get what's called valgus deformity in their wrist or varus deformity. And so essentially, if you don't correct that, they're going to get arthritis later on. And in some of those breeds, what they'll actually do is because the ulna is growing way too fast, they'll cut a piece of the ulna out and fill it in with, say, a piece of fat or a graft, and then it'll slow down that growth so that you can have correct angulation through the wrist and up into the elbow.
Well, let's talk about nutrition and food. Very impactful, important along the way. Puppy food transition over adult food. What are your thoughts there?
So my transition stage for these guys is I typically wean them from a puppy food that has lots of protein, increased calories, a different ratio of your calcium to phosphorus and vitamin D. I'll switch them, wean them over to an adult food about 10 months of age. And people will say that's not what the back of the dog food brand says. But typically at this time, except for we talked about that tibia, the shin bone, that's the last growth plate to close. That closes at 14 months. And bigger dogs, a lot of their height has already been set by age 10 months. And so I'll transition them over at that time. We actually had a pit bull puppy come in. It was a little late on its vaccines, right around 4 months for that first vaccine, and the legs were already crooked, bowing out. And you ask the owner how much they're feeding per day, and they're just feeding an excessive amount of food, like 4 cups a day. And so we're trying to transition them to twice a day feeding at about that 16-month period.
Well, how do you know how much to feed your dog? Even if it's, you have an adult dog, let's say 5 years old, weighs 25 pounds, not a tiny one, not a big one. How do you know how much your dry food that you should be feeding them? Side note, how do you know it should be dry food? I never know.
Right, exactly. So, dry versus canned food, they're going to have different calorie counts. And typically, what I tell people is the average, say, amount of calories in a quality dry dog food is about 389 calories per cup. So closer on up to 400 calories per cup. And if you multiply, you get their take their body weight, say it's 50 pounds, right? And you divide it and you're trying to get into kilograms. So you divide that by half, say about 25 kilograms multiplied by two is 50. And then you do it to a certain exponential formula. There's a neat little formula out there. There's some ones for growing, one for adult and whatnot. Then you can, your vet or the vet tech can help you calculate how many calories that your dog's needs. And there's actually food calculators online for calories which dogs need. And then you can decide how much is that. So in our household, typically they're fed a high quality food. And what people will say is, well, I feel like I'm feeding a high quality food. And what I tell people to do is go home and I'll show you a picture about how much stool my dog produces a day, and you show me a picture about how much stool your dog produces a day, and you'll find with the higher quality foods there's going to be less stool, less waste, because the body's processing it more. And so we'll talk about what happens in a 50-pound dog is in our household. Once they reach adulthood, they'll eat 2/3 to 1 cup twice a day plus snacks. So I allow a certain amount of calories per day for snacks.
Hmm. My dog poops less than yours.
I know that sounds, unless of course, maybe they're on a higher fiber diet due to some health issues and whatnot. So that's a good kind of balance act to tail.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
would you say, so I wrestle with this. My dog is on dry food
Mhm.
and I don't overfeed him. I'm very careful about that. But basically 2 cups a day.
Mhm.
I give them one in the morning, one in the late afternoon, an occasional treat here and there. But there's a lot of times where I'll have leftover chicken, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking, should I just give him a little bit of chicken, add it on top of his dry food? Is that a good idea to introduce that type of stuff if they've always been on dry food?
Some people, I think it's fine. We do it at our house as a
Okay.
topper, just as a little treat. We figured out how many calories they need if it makes them finish their bowl, and it's easier to clean up versus a free-fed dog. So they've done a study where puppies, they did a study with Labradors. It's a Purina study actually, and they fed dogs ad litem, so they left out food all day for them versus mill-fed dogs that were fed a specific amount of dogs and of food at a time. Basically, what they found was they followed these dogs throughout their lifetime, and the dogs who were fed a measured out portion lived 2 years longer. The dogs
Wow.
that weren't had more problems, say, with their hips, with their joints later on in life. And
Wow.
what, yeah, that's an incredible 2 years with extra with your pet. That's a really long time. And I always emphasize to people that at that spay neuter time, my mentor always told me, he goes, you're going to have the dog for the day, and sometimes even overnight. You're going to be sedating that animal. You're going to have them under anesthesia. So why don't you palpate those joints really well and just double check to see if there's any clicking that that you notice while you're palpating. That way you can feel a lot of normal dogs, and you'll be able to understand even in the exam room when you feel an abnormal dog. The dog may not always cry out in pain if they have a growth deformity. And that's a good time too, because you can call the owner and get permission to do x-rays under anesthesia so that you can maybe catch some of these the bone lesions in these pets and the joint lesions early on. So that's a very precise thing. Sometimes we get a little nervous because if
Wow.
they don't come back to us for that spay neuter time, hey, when are we going to feel those joints one last time? Because a lot of the growth problems happen between 5 and 8 months of age. So we have a very small window to correct them. Plus, if we need to refer them to a surgeon, there may be a delay in referring them. So we want to keep up with that and catch these as soon as possible.
Wow. So interesting. You're saying that if you have an animal under
Mhm.
anesthesia, and uh, while you have them, it's like let's check their joints, so they don't give any pushback. And I don't know, it's kind of creepy to me, but like just moving things around, you can actually hear clicks and pops,
Right.
even when they're sedated.
Even when they're sedated,
Wow.
when they're sedated, the nice thing is you still will get a little bit of that pain response. Granted, in your sedation, you have some pain medication on board, but then you kind of get to see, like we've talked about, where their eye position is, where their mouth position is, and it's a good way to practice when you have a little bit more time and you're not being rushed to get a feel of what normal is and what abnormal is.
So interesting, the stuff we're learning here today. Um, let's assume that our puppy is now a year old. What kind of things, maybe even a little bit older, what kind of things should we be doing to support them, support their physical growth, but also mental growth?
So what I've already recommended, usually when they've come through for their initial vaccine series, I've told them, if you want to get your pup into a basic obedience class, go ahead and get them into a basic obedience class now. And there's some really great trainers out there. And my pets, some of my rescues, I didn't get them till they were older, and so, but we still went to that puppy obedience class, and it didn't matter if I had a little tiny chihuahua among all these huge, wildly golden retrievers, Doberman pinchers, pit bulls. They had to do the same tricks. And what happens, I find, is right about that 8 month to a year age, we get this kind of, I call it a brain fart, because they're hitting their adolescence and teenage years. So then we'll go ahead and repeat and say, maybe they need to go to that second level obedience class, or do I need to go to start taking them if I want to do sports with them, right?
Hmm.
I want them to do agility coursework where they're running, they're jumping, they're going through tunnels and dog walks. Maybe I want to get them into a foundation class if they've done well with their obedience class. And this is the time where you really need to network. Your veterinarian obviously will know what who are the better agility trainers in town, or the obedience trainers. They can help guide you in that. And then say you want to do something, say you're like, oh, I don't know about that high impact stuff. I want to start doing scent work with my dogs. And I have one right now, a little corgi. She's just knocking the pants off. She's a high end detective scent dog. So that's
Wow.
pretty good with it. The that 1 year time frame of time, I also want to caution people for things that maybe they haven't caught. Sometimes a trainer and a that's around dogs all day they've got good eyes and everything. They can say, hey, you might want to go to a vet for what's going on and whatnot. So coming back full circle, basically, there's there's stories abound, but one story that sticks with me, and maybe you like to be on the cutting edge of things, Steve, is that this is about 15 plus years ago. Lab came to me at 18 months of age, uh, pain in the elbows. X-rays showed extensive arthritis. The X-rays looked like the dog was like over 10 years of age, and it's only 18 months old. Took the dog was there that day, showed my mentor, and he goes, well, what we can do is we can go in arthroscopically with a camera, and you would never think, hey, we can do this, but went in, cleaned out that joint and all those joint flaps the best that he could. And he actually harvested stem cells from the abdomen, or you can do it from the bone marrow, and then injected them into the joint when they had enough of the total number of cells, plus some of the platelet-rich plasma, which has the growth factors that direct those stem cells to maybe become that nice, smooth hyaline cartilage. And she had that. And they also banked the cells so she could have several injections throughout her lifetime. She lived to 15 years of age.
Wow. Huh. You hear little pieces of information about stem cell research and all of that, but I've never heard of it in animals like this to support them. Wow. Amazing. You're doing great work, Laura. It's so fantastic just hearing about this and just your insight and foresight on on our animals. Final question here. We talk about obedience training. Is it ever too late?
No, it's never too late. And that's the
Okay.
neat part about it. You can teach a dog, an old dog, new tricks, and that's for sure. I didn't get my deaf, almost blind Aussie. I was unable to get him into obedience. He finally went at 15 months of age. He barked the entire first class. I asked the trainer, please don't tell anyone here I'm a veterinarian. But he got most improved by the end of the class. And
Wow.
typically I get to work with the neat part is I get to work with maybe some older dogs where they're a little nervous about bringing them to class with a lot of dogs all at one time, and I get to work with them nice and slow. And dogs are uh, they're just so adept at learning, and they want to please you. And
Yeah,
you can teach them new tricks and new exercises all the
sure.
time.
Especially if they're food driven. You can, I think, get anything done if if the food is a motivator. I know you don't have a website, Laura, but if somebody has a question about any of this, they want to reach out, can they email you?
Yeah, email is actually one of the best ways to get a hold of me. That way, if you have x-rays or you have blood work or other questions, it's K9PROFNM@gmail.com. Or you can shoot me a text 505-280-5962. I try to respond when the best I can, but I'm usually down and out playing with the animals and doing exams. So really enjoyed the podcast series, and I hope to do more someday.
Oh, well, I appreciate everything that you've offered to us. And you've done wonderful things in New Mexico. Now we're spreading the word around the world, literally. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything, Laura. Really, really amazing. I learned so much.
There you go. Have fun with your pups and your kitties, Steve.
Yep. Thank you. Everybody else the same. It's little bundles of fur and love. We'll talk soon. Okay.
All righty. Take care, Steve.
We'll
Bye.
be right back.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.